Every soldier who set foot on FOB Kestrel heard the same rumor: this was the mountain where only the finest long-range shooters were allowed to serve. So when Major Elena Kovach stepped off the helicopter with 2 duffels and a long rifle case, more than a few heads turned, most of them shaking in disbelief. At 58, her eyes carried the weight of the ridges surrounding the base, carved deep by years that younger men dismissed as dead weight. Her stride was slow but deliberate, each step betraying a precision that felt almost out of place amid the restless energy of the unit. The younger soldiers watched her with smirks and whispers. What they saw was an aging officer, irrelevant to the cutting edge of special operations. The only thing that stood out was the rifle case clutched to her side like it was fused to her bones. Her paperwork listed a hollow title: liaison, logistics, responsibilities counting ammunition, signing manifests, making sure the bureaucracy stayed tidy. An invisible job in a place where visibility meant survival. The man who came to greet her wasn't a commander, but a weary corporal with a clipboard. He pointed toward a shipping container set apart from the main barracks. No welcome, no ceremony. Her quarters were as isolated as her reputation. Inside, the room was bare steel walls and concrete floor radiating cold indifference. Elena unpacked with the same severity others had mocked uniforms folded razor sharp. A handful of worn books lined up with exact spacing. At last, she laid the rifle case on the cot. Her fingers hesitated over the latch, then opened it with the reverence of a priest unsealing an altar. Resting in cut foam was no gleaming M2010 or carbon fiber 338 La Pua like the younger shooters flaunted. It was a Dragunov SVDM2 heavily modified over decades new barrel, reinforced stock, precision optics carefully chosen, 2 outsiders. It was Relic steel from a bygone war. To her, it was memory, discipline, and the only truth she trusted to endure. Beyond the walls, the wind of the Kestrel peaks scoured the base, carrying a chill that hinted at storms to come. The young soldiers still laughed under their breath. They did not yet know that the storm gathering would force them to see the woman they mocked for what she truly was. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more untold military stories here on Stories Unseen. She treated the rifle like a conversation partner, not loud, not sentimental. Just the low mechanics of touch and oil and metal talking back. The chassis was an old poem rewritten with new craft, a Dragunov frame modernized for 338 conversion, an adjustable stock, a free-floated match barrel, and German glass that ate light. Elena worked through the bolt with an economy that suggested muscle memory, older and steadier than the men who snickered outside. Each part was wiped, each screw checked, each turret given a small, private nod before being tucked back into foam like a sleeping thing. Outside, the world of FOB Kestrel operated on a different currency. Laughter rolled past the corrugated walls. The younger marksmen swaggered with tablet solvers in one hand and protein bars in the other. They traded bragging rights the way some people trade stocks: fastest time on the drill, tightest group at range, most followers on a live stream. Master Sergeant Lucas Thorne lived in that world. He had the face and the fury of a man convinced that youth equaled superiority, 32, carved like granite, and sure his tech stack could solve anything. He stood in Elena's doorway the next morning and wore dismissal like a uniform. "Major Kovach," he said, the rank tasting like accusation. "Looks like your last 10 years were administrative." "Ma'am, not a lot of high-angle ballistics in the Pentagon." "Right." His chin jabbed at the crate open on her cot. "What is that? Did you win it in a raffle?" She didn't look up from the bolt. Her voice was low, even. "It's a modernized Dragunov with 338 conversion parts, reliable in extremes." Thorne laughed in a way that had no humor. "We're running a high-tempo, high-tech operation here. My teams use integrated ballistic computers, laser rangefinders that talk to their scopes, and rifles that cost more than your pension. We don't babysit people who aren't field current. Your predecessor handled supply. You'll do the same." He pointed toward the motor pool and the depot like a thumb toward exile. So Elena went to the depot. The place a bored corporal named Ben Carter led her with a clipboard and a polite, practiced indifference. Carter was Thorne's protege, in every obvious way young, quick with a spotting scope, fluent in solvers, and slow to trust hands that insisted on old rituals. For a week, Elena embraced the exile with the sort of grace people mistake for resignation. She counted M118LR crates, verified lot numbers, and logged serials into a ruggedized laptop while the range outside thumped with the noise of practice fire. But she did those tasks with a soldier's curiosity, where others ran checks with cursory glances. Elena ran a fingertip along seals, pried a corner of a crate to smell for humidity, checked brass for micro-corrosion. "Humidity is the enemy of consistency," she told Carter once, so quietly he had to lean in. "A few grains of corroded powder changes your point of impact at 1,000 meters." He watched the way she said it like a warning, like a fact, and it unsettled him more than any lecture from the TOC. Her real job, the one she'd been assigned by habit, even if not by brass, began after the paperwork. From the depot's loading bay, she had a slanted, partial view of the long-distance range. Alpha Team's tech glittered below Menke 11s and SR-25s on rests. Leupold and Schmidt and Bender glass catching sun. Kestrel 5700 units blinking on tablet overlays. They fed numbers into solvers and trusted the readouts with a near-religious certainty. Elena watched the mirage more than the screen, where their computers saw stable inputs. She saw breath rising from the valley, a wavering heat that turned bullet paths into liquid. In the pre-dawn, she would pinch up a handful of dust and let it go across the air, watching the particles tumble and drift. The way they moved told her more than a dozen line items on a tablet. Carter, watching, began to fold those moments into the margin of his respect. Then the math in the mountain started to disagree. On screen, the Kestrel read one wind profile, the solvers spat another. The young spotters argued into mics while shifting ranges and rekeying numbers. Thorne barked orders with the thin certainty of someone whose tools had rarely lied. Alpha lined up a shot at a practice target, and the tracer puffed 2 feet wide. The muttered profanity in the talk had the cadence of failure. Elena closed her hand around the rim of the loading bay, feeling the sting of cold there. She could hear, beneath the hissing radios, a different rhythm, the canyon's hush and the far thin crack of wind across the ridge. She set the crate of M118 down, wiped her palms on her fatigues, and walked to the container edge where the view was clean. Corporal Carter followed her, curiosity overriding caution. "You really think you can read that from here?" he asked. One eyebrow lifted. She didn't answer with theory. She reached up, pinched the dust between thumb and forefinger, and let it fall. Where it twisted and rolled, that was where the air would bite. Where it held, that was where the lull would be. Carter saw the dust catch and knew, in an instant, that the man who dismissed her had never learned to listen. A low voice crackled through the talk. Clipped and alarmed, an intelligence ping had popped up an HVT sighting in a valley compound, not on the exercise map. The tone shifted like a tide. Thorne went still in a way that looked like calculation instead of pride. The young soldiers straightened. Someone in the back thunked a hand on a console. Elena felt the mountain press its attention toward the same point on the map. She felt the old mechanics of wind and shadow arrange themselves in her chest like a second diagnostic. She had been given a role to shelve boxes. The mountain had different plans. She turned toward the Tausi, the dust still on her fingers, and for the first time the laughter outside seemed to thin to a single edge. Something was moving down in the ravine, and it wasn't only the wind. They called it the Serpent's Tooth on the map, an ugly knot of canyon and courtyard so narrow the wind behaved like a blade. From the talk's windows it looked like a serrated line of shadow and sun. On the screens, a cluster of shifting pixels and a name, Russell, to most in the room, It was math range, elevation, velocity vectors. A stack of numbers fed into solvers until they produced an answer. To Elena Kovach. It was something else entirely. The canyon was not an equation. It was weather. It was memory. It was the way light bent when rock lied. Alpha team was sharp, as clean a clockwork as any unit in theater. They moved into position on the south ridge with their MK-11s and SR-25s on rests. Leopold and Schmidt and Bender glass glinting. Lasers pinged the target courtyard. Data fed into Kestrel units. Numbers pumped into rugged tablets. A scan eagle floated above them, its patient eye sending everything back to Kestrel. On paper, it was perfect. Only it wasn't. Elena had watched this dance for weeks from her corner of the depot, target locked. Solver consulted. Trigger squeezed. The machines never lied about what they measured, but they ignored what they could not. Mirage boiling up from a sun-beaten valley floor, bending light as though the air itself were glass. Thin dust devils caught in gullies, changing wind direction for 50 yards of a bullet's flight. Small betrayals written in the mountain's margins. She had learned to read those margins, alone. Before dawn, she'd fire a cold bore round at a rusted boulder half a mile away, then study where the chip appeared, listening to the way the mountain breathed. She didn't need tablets. She needed dust on her fingertips, the air against her teeth, the rhythm of silence between gusts. Machines gave numbers. The mountain gave behavior. Both were true. Only one told the whole story. That morning the story came with orders. Russell charismatic. Ruthless. A man who stitched village grievances into something sharper was inside a hardened compound in the canyon. Intelligence said he was planning to move. High command wanted him erased before the chance slipped. Colonel Marcus Hale chose Alpha for the job. Thorne briefed with the confidence of a man who'd never doubted his tools. Range to target 1,850 meters. Wind gusting 20 to 30 knots. Variable but within tolerance. We'll wait for a lull. Take the shot. The talk settled into ritual. Voices dropped. Screens glowed. The scan eagle's feed held steady above the compound, an unblinking eye. For 90 minutes. Alpha waited. The storm pushed harder than predicted. Numbers jumped, fell, spiked again. Mirage shimmered like water over the feed. The solvers began contradicting themselves every 5 seconds. Finally, Alpha's call cut through the static. We are in position, eyes on target. Wind is a vortex, solutions all over the place. The spotter's tone betrayed the strain of watching the air lie in real time. Find a lull and take the shot, Thorne barked. He said it like confidence could muscle the world into obedience. The sniper fired. The shot went high and right. 2 feet outside the doorway, on screen. The courtyard erupted, guards shouted, radios crackled. Russell vanished inside a hardened room. The window closed. The TOC's hum collapsed into a chorus of frustration. Thorne slammed a fist into a console. For a moment, the room looked like a place where control had slipped through their fingers. Elena rose. She didn't rush. She moved as if each step were measured, like a latch clicking into place. She pressed the mic key. Alpha, this is Major Kovach. The room hushed. It wasn't her rank that stilled them, it was the tone. A voice too calm to ignore. Position, she asked. South Ridge, bearing 340. The spotter replied. Her eyes traced the canyon's contour lines, following them like a sailor reading currents. She saw what the machines could not. The main valley was channeling wind down, then rebounding it off a cliff face to create a hidden updraft, a rotor effect, a twist no sensor could cleanly report. Major, Thorne snapped, sharp as a crack. Stand down, you're not cleared. Hale lifted a hand. His eyes never left her. Correction. Major. Her voice was even. Disregard the computer. This is Kentucky windage. You'll have 3 hard gusts. After the 3rd, there will be a lull, 4 to 5 seconds. On that lull, hold 2.9 mil left. 0.35 mil high, fire on my mark. The numbers landed like a slap. At this range, 2. 9 mils was enormous, a correction that mocked the solvers. If she was wrong, Alpha would miss again. And if Alpha missed again, Russell would vanish. Men could die. She could face court-martial. The silence that followed was heavy with doubt. The spotter finally whispered, "Major, that's a hell of a correction. Trust me," she said. No bravado, no plea, just certainty. The scan eagle shifted, on screen. Russell emerged again. Dark jacket, moving toward a vehicle, guards clustered tight. The sniper's reticle drifted far left of the door, as though aimed at nothing. The spotter's voice was tight. First gust now, second gust now, the third gust tore through, rattling comms with its violence, and then silence. "Hold," Elena said. "Calm as stone. Mark. Fire." The shot cracked. On the feed. Dust burst from the wall exactly where she had predicted 2 feet left. A foot high. A beat later. Russell folded, collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut. For a moment, no one in the talk breathed. Then target down. HVT neutralized. Repeat. HVT neutralized. The words rippled through the room like a seismic wave. Expressions shifted. Mockery evaporated. In its place was something none of them wanted to admit: awe. Thorn stood frozen. His world, once so neat, had just been rewritten. His tools had failed. Hers had not. But the mountain doesn't applaud, as Alpha confirmed, and the scan eagle orbited above. Another tone slid into the commnet. Intelligence flagged it movement on an opposing ridge. A specialist, a sniper. Someone answering the death of Russell with a different kind of math. Jin, the insurgent's ghost. 30 coalition kills to his name, in the fissures of stone. Someone was already sighting back. Elena's eyes closed, cataloging the wind one more time. The serpent's tooth had taken 1 life today. It wasn't finished. The base was no longer the same place. 1 shot had changed it. The impossible correction Elena Kovach had called in the serpent's tooth spread like fire through dry brush. Retold in mess halls and whispered between patrols. Soldiers who once brushed past her now stepped aside. Major was no longer courtesy, it was gravity. They began noticing things they had never looked for before, how her gaze lingered on ridgelines. As if she were already preparing for the next fight. How she could call the temperature within a degree by nothing more than a breath. How she carried stillness like a weapon, as if the mountain itself had taught her patience. Thorn noticed most of all, his identity built on solvers. Optics. Precision doctrine had been shaken apart by a single voice over comms. Calm and irrefutable. He replayed the mission feed obsessively, hunting for flaws in her correction. There were none. Cross-referencing her hold with logged wind shifts only confirmed what he already feared. She had read the canyon exactly. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was mastery. Fury at being outclassed drove him deeper. He hacked through her service file expecting dull staff tours, a couple of dusty deployments. Instead, he found nothing whole decades blank. Blacked out with the weight of redaction. Top secret, eyes only, Project Ghost. Citations stripped away. Commendations without context. The file was more black bar than record. For the first time, Thorn felt something colder than anger settle beneath his ribs. This wasn't a forgotten major shoved into obscurity. This was someone the system itself had tried to bury. Not a relic, a legend deliberately erased. And legends draw fire. The death of Russell didn't cripple the insurgency. It ignited it. 2 days later, Alpha learned what form vengeance took. They were repositioning when the first shot cracked the air. A radio man screamed, leg shattered. The rest of the team dove into a shale slope, pinned by a rifle they couldn't see. 1,000 meters of barren stone offered nothing but sharp fragments for cover. Sniper high velocity. No visual Alpha's voice cut ragged across the net. The talk erupted. Operators scrambled drones for angles, but each time one dipped, a round snapped past, forcing it skyward again. Whoever was out there knew how to blind the sky. Colonel Hale's jaw set hard. "We can't send QRF until that sniper is suppressed. Where is he?" The answer came from intelligence channels. Quiet and final Jin. The ghost of their nightmares. More than 30 coalition kills. Each a lesson in patience and cruelty. He hadn't been sent to hold ground. He'd been sent for revenge. Thorn threw every piece of tech he had at the ridge thermal sweeps. Acoustic triangulation. Signal analysis. Nothing. Jin shifted firing points with surgical stealth. Suppressor swallowing flash. Shadows erasing his outline. The machines couldn't find him. To Alpha. He was death in the rocks, waiting for a breath too long. For the first time in his career, Thorn's tools betrayed him. His team was minutes from being carved apart, and all his precision was blind. Sweat pooled at his collar. Pride turned to ash on his tongue. He resisted the thought at first, barked new orders, tried recalibrating, pushed another sweep. Each attempt came back empty. Shots cracked, closer. Alpha's voices strained thinner with every report. At last, the resistance collapsed. He crossed the talk floor, every step heavy, like a man walking toward the gallows. Elena stood at the topographical table, hands loose at her sides, eyes distant to the others. It looked like she wasn't even in the room anymore, but already out there on the ridge, listening, measuring, waiting. When Thorn stopped in front of her, the silence was suffocating. His voice, stripped of arrogance, carried only desperation. "We can't find him," he admitted. "Alpha's pinned. They've got maybe 30 minutes of daylight after that. Nothing. They won't survive the night. Can you?" He swallowed. "Can you help us?" The words fell into the talk like a detonation. The man who had mocked her, who had dismissed her as obsolete, was pleading. Elena didn't answer him. Not immediately. Her head tilted, as if she were listening to something no one else could hear, the frantic cadence of Alpha's comms, the faint echo of gunfire rolling between canyon walls. Her breath slipped out slow. "He's not invisible," she murmured. "You're just looking the wrong way." The room leaned in. Her finger came down on the map, tapping a jagged ridge that faced into the dying light. "There," she said. But her voice carried something else, a gravity that told them the truth. If Jin was half the ghost they claimed, this wasn't going to be a hunt. It was going to be a duel. The sharp crack of Jin's rifle echoed, chased by the low, rolling boom of its wake. To most in the Taosi, it was terror incarnate, an enemy unseen, untouchable, stripping their control away. To Elena Kovach, it was something else. She closed her eyes, listening not just for sound, but for its rhythm, its weight, the faint signature hidden inside. Every sniper left one. Jin's was no different. "Drone 3. She said, calm, steady. The feed shifted to high orbit rock, shadow, void. To everyone else, noise. To her, a page already half read. Her finger marked a fissure between two boulders. "There, he's built a hole. 10 degrees of fire on Alpha. Afternoon sun keeps him invisible." Thorn's voice strained. "Major, that's just shadow. Thermal's clean." She turned, eyes carrying something older than doubt. Patience leaves patterns. His suppressors heavy, too heavy to move far. The first crack runs down the canyon, but the echo climbs. And look, a faint puff of dust, almost invisible, bloomed on the feed. Concussion. He's fortified. A spider hole. The room shifted. Not silence, not awe, just the raw, involuntary hush of men who realized she had mapped an enemy with nothing but dust, echoes, and patience. Coordinates relayed, counter-snipers moving before they reached position. Thorn's voice came low, reluctant, yet hungry for truth. "Major, who trained you?" Elena was still. "Then no one you know, because I trained them." She paused. Once they called me Spectre. The word dropped like iron. Every soldier in the room had heard the ghost stories an operator too skilled to be real. A myth used to scare rookies. And here she stood, flesh and bone, unshaken. The radio cut through. Hunter 2, target neutralized. Spider hole exactly where you said. We would never have found it. The talk changed in that instant. Not applause, not cheer, just a recalibration of belief. Soldiers straightened unconsciously as Elena walked toward the exit. Thorne intercepted her, spine rigid. His salute was not to an officer, it was to a master. Dawn bled clean across the Kestrel peaks. The storm was gone. Sky washed sharp and bright. Elena stood on her private ledge, the one place she had always gone alone. No Dragunov today, in her hand. A single spent casing from the counter-sniper's shot. She rolled it in her palm. Not as victory, not as trophy, only acknowledgement, a balance restored. For now, footsteps behind her. Carter, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. Major, he said. Softer now. He offered one. Black, I figured. Her smile was almost invisible, but it was there. She took it. Fingers brushed his calloused by youth, hers by years. They stood together, watching the valley wake. He wanted to ask everything Spectre. Impossible shots. The man named Vasily, who once taught her that wind and shadow never lied. But he didn't. Somehow he knew the silence was the answer. Something passed between them in that quiet. Not words, a torch, for the first time since her arrival. She was no longer a relic. She was the measure. And Carter, once cocky, now humbled, stood straighter beside her because of it. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold over the ridges. Elena Kovach Spectre remained calm and unbowed. Not as a ghost of forgotten wars, but as proof of something timeless, that mastery is not in youth or in machines, but in patience, discipline, and the quiet certainty of those who truly listen. FOB Kestrel never forgot the week the mountain swallowed its arrogance. Alpha lived. The wolf was gone. Jin, their ghost, erased by another, older one, in reports. She was only Major Kovach. Her role reduced to ink and black bars, but for those who saw it, the truth lived in their bones. They had seen the Spectre. Carter carried it forward, months later, on a wind-scoured ridge. He paused before a shot. His Kestrel unit blinked numbers. He ignored them, lifted dust, let it fall, listened, just as she had. Legends don't retire, they don't vanish. They remain in those who watched, who listened, who learned. Elena Kovach walked back from her ledge and into the base's rhythm. She asked for nothing, claimed nothing. But she had left them with more than awe. A lesson. True mastery doesn't shout at whispers. Legends endure not through power, but through the standards they set and the courage they leave for others to carry.